Hey guys, I hope you're all doing very well. Welcome back to another video, and today I'm going to be talking about The Flash. Now, this is a movie that's been highly anticipated for a while. There's been setbacks, there's been delays, and it's also been centered around controversy, especially around Ezra Miller. But now it's finally been released. Now, I want to make this point very clear for this review. Ezra Miller is evil, right? He's just a menace, and I don't want to, do this review just to kind of say about Ezra Miller this, Ezra Miller that. How is DC still carrying on, using him in his movies? You know, he it's. I don't want to make this review just based on that. Listen, he's evil. There's so many allegations and crimes, especially if you look it up. It reads like a PhD thesis because it's so in depth with how many charges he has. So I just want to kind of throw that out. So this review is literally just going to be based on the film itself, and I don't want to kind of center this on just to try and hate on this movie just because Ezra Miller's in it. So overall, watching the film, I could say is pretty good, and it's certainly the best attempts that I've seen DC have done for a while. But I will also say it does kind of still has its superhero faults, more or less. It's more or less the kind of the issues I would sort of describe as superhero movies have been milking out for quite a while, and also kind of in general some things that Hollywood has kind of produced in recent years. But if I had to describe The Flash overall, it's a pretty good movie, and it's definitely what I would describe as acceptable fan service. Now, if I had to really describe the story is very similar to a lot of these other movies that really takes on the multiverse concept. So it's very somewhat similar to Spider-Man No Way Home. So really the story does follow Barry Allen, and he's basically trying to sort of, get his case together to free his dad from prison who has been framed for his mother's murder. And basically Barry wants to put all the evidence together to prove his father's innocence, but unfortunately it hasn't gone successful. So basically Barry Allen now discovers that his powers, he can basically travel back in time and alter and change the reality. And he wants to do that to basically save his mother from uncertain death, but also to really gather the evidence that was needed to really sort of free his dad from prison. So that's kind of really the whole idea of this, what the story of this film is. And really the film itself, it does have an interesting story, and it is also very emotional. So you do get a lot of emotional scenes where you see Barry Allen and his mother throughout various sequences of the film goes that would change back in time. And I think really that really did create a very emotional connection between Barry Allen and his mum. And I really felt that there was a very different intentions that they were trying to do with this movie. That it actually wanted to take its story seriously and not to really sort of build up any sort of comedy or cringe as such. Now, I will get into this sort of later, but the movie itself does have some cringy pieces of dialogue, but I don't think they really used it in a way that really disrupted the emotional scenes that this film was trying to build up from. Which I can say that it was pretty good for the most part that they were able to do that. So everything from the story that they were trying to play off from this movie was taken seriously. Now, one thing I will also mention about this movie as well is that they do definitely seem to build up characters very well and develop the overall story. Now, I will also say one thing I will have an issue with is that most of the characters were used as props. I'm not going to explain about it because I don't want to spoil it, but that was a bit of an issue that it was just they were just kind of throwing in characters just to kind of use it as some sort of fickle fan service. But when you do kind of get into some of the main characters, especially Barry Allen, also Michael Keaton's Batman, and even at the beginning when you have Ben Affleck's Batman, it was actually pretty good. They actually used them in a very well structured way. And I know many people don't, give a lot of credit for Ben Affleck as Batman, but I think he definitely delivered a very good, important role for the beginning, most of the beginning of the film, and it was definitely what I would seem to be kind of acceptable for what it was. But Also, definitely the main thing I would say was Michael Keaton's Batman. I think for him, it definitely felt that he was a little bit old for the role. I don't want to kind of use it in a way that it felt that he's just not the same that he was many, many years back when he was Batman. But I think when you kind of look at his age, he definitely does look like he is kind of retired the character a bit. And it was kind of like DC just thought, fuck it, we'll just bring him back. So I think that was kind of one thing I would say. But I think when they do have him in this movie, they use him in a way that works pretty well. And I also do like Supergirl as well. I think she has a good role in this film. Now, I do think a lot of the scenes that really involved her, because I'm going to kind of get some bits of criticism for this film, but there is a lot of scenes where there is some action scenes that go on which involve Supergirl, and basically a lot of the visuals and the CGI just looked so artificial. It felt so green screen heavy, and it really felt very obvious that it didn't look very live action. So I'm gonna kind of speak about that in a little bit, but certainly when you watch Supergirl, she definitely does have an important role that really helps to the story. That really Barry wants to try and get back to his own universe, because changing the aspects of the reality has kind of messed up the timelines and the other sort of insertions that happen. So it's created like a sort of a multiverse where all the timelines in the universes all collide to each other. And I think the funny thing is with this movie is that they kind of used a spaghetti analogy to really kind of explain the multiverse, which is kind of, it works, but it was kind of weird because for a lot of people who watch these sort of multiverse concepts, they kind of can't get their head around it. So it's like usually timelines are all parallel, but when you change and alter the reality, they snap or they're not parallel. And basically, when all the spaghetti is all kind of boiled up and is all soft, they all basically collide to each other. So that was kind of the idea I was getting at, and I think it was kind of a funny way of looking at it. So, but I think overall the characters that were used for the most part were developed pretty well. Now, I will say one of the things I would say that they didn't really feel like there was a real villain. I know the movie does have Zod as the villain, but I never really felt that he had so much screen time with this movie. It was very limited. I really felt this movie was more focused on, Barry trying to, restore the reality that he created, going back in time to try and save his mum and then try and, get his dad out of prison in his own universe. It didn't really feel like Zod was really the main focus in this film, which was a bit strange. And I kind of questioned why was he even in it. So that was kind of one bit I would sort of criticize with this film a little bit, is the actual use of the villains. Now I'm gonna kind of now talk about some of the issues I had with this film. Now, one of the bigger glaring issues I do have with this movie is the CGI. Now, people online were talking about how bad the CGI was looking at the trailers, and yeah, to be honest with you, it really wasn't good. It looks very artificial, very green screen. It looks like, a lot of the characters felt like they were somehow copied and pasted on a background and they were just dragged along by a mouse cursor. It did not look very good or appealing. And, especially with some of the action sequences when they kind of go through all the CGI as well, there's like lots of visual lightning effects, fast effects going on. And I think for some of the action scenes you're watching, it felt very disorientating. So sometimes you're kind of left with all just visuals all over the place when some action and scenes were kind of, spewing out, and it just didn't, I think, worked for the most part. But to be honest with you, I think with some of the action moments as well, it they definitely delivered on action pretty decently in a good way, but it felt very short, and there wasn't really so much action that was really delivered in this movie from my perspective. So that's kind of one thing I will say. I think the bigger glaring issue this film has is definitely its visuals. Um, Also, one of the things I will also say that I will talk about is also I do think I kind of spoke about this a lot with other movies already. I'm kind of bored with the whole dialogue, and they try and come up with the comedy and the gags to kind of pad on the time a little bit. It's not persistently as bad as most other films, but this film does have quite a lot of it, and yeah, it didn't really, I would say, worked. There were some scenes that kind of worked, but again, I'm just kind of really tired with it now. So those are kind of some of the issues I would have with this film. Also, kind of going along with it as well, kind of a lot of the characters that were introduced into this film were there was a lot of other characters that were introduced that felt like props. It didn't really feel like there was so much of a place for them to be in it. So that was kind of another aspect of the criticism I would have for this film. But overall, I would have to say this is definitely the best attempt from DC I've seen for a while. Um, and for the DC universe as a whole. I mean, most of the DC Extended Universe movies have just not really hit their mark very well. And I think this movie definitely changed that for certain. So, overall, if I have to rate The Flash, I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. I really do think this movie does achieve more things right, although there are some, teething issues I can sort of get into a little bit. It's not so bad that it actually, hurts the overall, feeling of the movie. It just has some technical issues, but I feel like as a story, as a way of building up characters, building up emotions, and kind of having a little bit of twist to the sequences of the story here and then, it actually worked pretty well. And yeah, that's about it. See you later.